In the heart of the Arabian Peninsula lies a battlefield that has quietly defied all expectations: Yemen. It's where one of the wealthiest, most heavily armed nations on earth, Saudi Arabia, has struggled for nearly a decade against a ragtag militia known as the Houthis. To the outside world, it's a military mismatch that makes no sense. Saudi Arabia has access to some of the world's most dangerous weapons. They have American fighter jets, precision-guided missiles, drones, surveillance systems, and some of the best military hardware money can buy. They're backed by powerful allies like the United States, the UK, and the Gulf states. They have vast oil wealth, a disciplined air force, and cutting-edge intelligence. And yet, they still lost. How could this happen? How could Saudi Arabia, richer, more connected, and far better equipped, fail to defeat the Houthis, a militia that, in theory, should have been crushed in months? To understand this shocking imbalance, we have to go back to where it all began. The Yemen conflict escalated in 2014 when the Houthi rebels, an armed political and religious movement from the north, stormed the capital city of Sana'a. The Houthis are Zaydi Shiite Muslims, and their ideology is strongly anti-American and anti-Israel, with deep ties to Iran. They opposed the Saudi-backed Yemeni government and quickly gained control of large swaths of the country. This sent alarm bells ringing in Riyadh. Saudi Arabia saw the rise of the Houthis not just as a civil war, but as an existential threat. Why? Because they believed the Houthis were proxies of Iran, their regional rival. In 2015, Saudi Arabia launched a full-scale military intervention under the name Operation Decisive Storm. It was meant to be a quick, crushing blow to restore Yemen's internationally recognized government and push back Iran's influence. But what was supposed to be a few months of airstrikes and ground support turned into a grinding, humiliating, and ultimately futile war. Despite their superior air power, Saudi Arabia never truly gained control of Yemen. In fact, the longer the war dragged on, the more sophisticated the Houthis became. They started off using AK-47s and pickup trucks, but within years, they were launching ballistic missiles, drones, and cross-border raids deep into Saudi territory. They hit Saudi oil facilities, airports, and even military bases. The turning point came in 2019, when Houthi drones struck Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil processing facility in Abqaiq, temporarily cutting oil production in half. It was a staggering embarrassment, and a message to the world. The Houthis weren't going anywhere. So, why didn't Saudi Arabia win? First, let's talk strategy. Saudi Arabia relied heavily on airstrikes and avoided a deep ground invasion. They feared a high casualty count and political backlash at home. This hands-off approach allowed the Houthis to blend into civilian areas, using guerrilla tactics to their advantage. The Saudi coalition often bombed targets based on limited intelligence, leading to widespread civilian casualties. Hospitals, weddings, markets. Many of them were hit by mistake or faulty intel. This didn't just tarnish Saudi Arabia's image internationally, it pushed more Yemenis into the arms of the Houthis, who positioned themselves as defenders against foreign aggression. Meanwhile, the Houthis were fighting for survival. They knew the terrain, they were deeply rooted in local communities, and most importantly, they had motivation. They weren't just defending land, they were defending identity, sovereignty, and in their view, freedom from outside interference. For them, this was a holy war. And for Saudi Arabia, it was a geopolitical chess game. But there's another layer to this failure, and it's one that Saudi leaders are quietly obsessed with: Israel. Yes, Israel, just a few hundred miles away, has faced far more dangerous threats: Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and constant pressure from every direction. Yet, Israel handles these challenges with precision and overwhelming success. Their Air Force has conducted thousands of missions. Their Iron Dome intercepts rockets with surgical accuracy. Their intelligence services, Mossad, Shin Bet, Unit 8200, are world-renowned for sabotage, espionage, and counterterrorism. Even Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is rumored to privately ask, "Why can't we be like them?" The truth is, Israel fights with strategy, innovation, and discipline. Their soldiers are highly trained. Their intelligence networks are surgical. Their war plans are layered and calculated. They don't just bomb, they infiltrate. They destabilize from within. They sow confusion among enemies and disrupt supply lines. Their tech sector and military-industrial complex work in unison to give them the edge. In contrast, Saudi Arabia's military is bloated and over-dependent on foreign contractors. Many of their pilots, engineers, and analysts are foreign nationals. American and European companies maintain their aircraft and weapons systems. Without Western support, their military is significantly weakened. And while their air force is impressive on paper, they lack the ground capability, special forces experience, and battlefield adaptability that nations like Israel possess. The Houthis, meanwhile, adapted fast. They learned how to use drones and missiles effectively. Many of these weapons were smuggled in or provided by Iran, but they were also built locally, using scavenged parts and reverse engineering. What the Houthis lacked in firepower, they made up for in resilience. They used human shields, underground tunnels, decoys, and misinformation campaigns. They turned every Saudi misstep into a propaganda victory. One of the most underestimated reasons for Saudi Arabia's failure is Yemen itself. Yemen's not just a country, it's a labyrinth of tribes, factions, and loyalties. Outsiders have historically failed to conquer it. The Ottomans tried and failed, the British tried and failed, and now the Saudis have failed. Yemen's terrain, rugged mountains, deserts, and urban sprawl, makes conventional warfare nearly impossible. The Houthis leverage this to their advantage. Meanwhile, back in Riyadh, the Saudi leadership became increasingly frustrated. Billions were being spent, civilians were dying, the international community was growing restless. And the Houthis? They were not only still standing, they were stronger than ever. To make matters worse, Saudi Arabia's coalition began to fracture. The United Arab Emirates, one of its main allies in the war, started pulling out forces and pursuing its own interests in southern Yemen. Tensions emerged between different factions fighting the Houthis, weakening the coalition further. There was no unified vision, just competing agendas. By 2022, Saudi Arabia was desperate for a way out. Truce talks began, ceasefires were negotiated. The Saudis realized that military victory was no longer on the table. The Houthis had survived the storm. They were not defeated, they were legitimized. The contrast with Israel became even more painful. Israel fights asymmetric wars constantly, and it does so with fierce resolve. When rockets are fired from Gaza, Israel responds within minutes. When Iran builds a nuclear facility, Mossad sabotages it. When a threat emerges, Israel neutralizes it, often without even being seen. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, struggled with a single militia in its own backyard for nearly a decade, despite having every advantage. The fallout from the war didn't just impact Yemen. It fundamentally changed Saudi Arabia's position in the region. Once seen as the uncontested leader of the Arab world, the war exposed the limits of its influence. Iran celebrated the Houthi resilience as a symbolic victory. Tehran had bled Saudi Arabia through a proxy war without firing a direct shot. And in doing so, Iran elevated the Houthis from a fringe movement to a regional force. The longer the war dragged on, the more pressure mounted from the international community. Human rights organizations accused the Saudi-led coalition of war crimes. Civilian casualties were mounting. The world saw photos of starving children, destroyed hospitals, and bombed-out cities. Calls for arms embargoes grew louder. The war wasn't just a battlefield failure. It became a global PR disaster. Inside Saudi Arabia, confidence in the military eroded. Billions were being spent on a conflict that was achieving nothing. Oil facilities were attacked. International investors grew wary. Vision 2030, the Crown Prince's dream for a post-oil future, was being overshadowed by a bloody, unresolved war next door. And through it all, the Houthis gained legitimacy. Their control over northern Yemen solidified. They became part of the political conversation. They now sit at the table in peace talks. Saudi Arabia didn't destroy the Houthis. It made them stronger. Even more troubling, the war sent a message to the entire region that Saudi Arabia, despite its wealth, weapons, and allies, could be beaten. It showed that determination, strategy, and motivation could overcome firepower. It inspired other militant groups, and it weakened Saudi Arabia's image as the Gulf's invincible power. Now, Saudi Arabia faces hard questions. It must rethink its military doctrine, reduce its dependency on foreign contractors, and develop smarter, more adaptive strategies. It must invest in intelligence, special forces, and asymmetric tactics. And it must remember that true power doesn't just come from bombs. It comes from wisdom. For Yemen, the scars will last a generation. Millions displaced, hundreds of thousands dead, entire cities reduced to rubble. And yet, the Houthis remain standing. It's one of the most dramatic imbalances in modern warfare. The kingdom that had everything lost to a militia that had nothing but belief, resilience, and patience. Saudi Arabia had the money, the weapons, the support, but it lacked what truly wins wars: strategy, unity, and understanding of the enemy. And that is why they lost. If you found this story revealing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. On this channel, we explore the truths that hide behind headlines, wars, power struggles, and the silent forces that shape our world. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you think Saudi Arabia learned from its mistakes? What do you think this means for the future of the Middle East? Subscribe now and be a part of a community that questions more and digs deeper. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and never stop asking why.